Mahuka at Walibe Rhône-Alpes is the newest Intamin roller coaster to open in Europe, and it's the second ever installation of the Hot Racer single rail design. It's a thoroughly modern coaster, utilising new technology to provide thrills, but is it any good? Let's find out. I'm Rollercoaster David, and this is my review of Mahuka. Let's start off by breaking down the ride's layout. Mahuka starts with a slow left turn out of the station that leads into a tyre-propelled launch. This launch track rapidly accelerates you, and the ride reaches a top speed of 67 km per hour, or 42 miles per hour. At the end of the launch is an inverted top hat, where you rapidly change direction before you're sent over a speed hill into a twisted airtime hill to the right. You then drop into a double down before corkscrewing head over heels to the right, which sends you into the ride's second launch. This time, at the end of the launch, there's an outward banked top hat that reaches the ride's highest point of 59 feet. Next up is a powerful airtime hill before you enter a wave turn to the left, before a rapid chicane sends you to the right then to the left. After another quick wave turn, you then go through a heartline roll inversion over water before you jump up into the brakes. As you can see, it's a really rapid, action-packed and well-paced ride. My first impression of Mahuka was really rather good. I was lucky enough that my first ride was in the front row, and it provided a great experience that was fast, smooth and fun with plenty of airtime and thrilling inversions. Prior to riding this coaster, I had heard that the first version of the Hot Racer in Sydney, Australia could be rather rough, but this ride was as smooth as glass. Supposedly, the ride had several modifications to it since the prototype, so it's now a lot smoother. There was a little bit of a rattle if you sat further back in the train, but it was never anything that was significant and didn't detract from the ride at all. Looking a bit closer at some of the elements, the launches were both quite satisfying, and they've got a good kick to them despite being the tyre-propelled variety. The initial acceleration is less than what you get on an LSM or hydraulic launch, but after a certain point the speed really builds up quite rapidly. This effect is heightened by revving engine sounds that are played next to the launch track. The inverted top hat makes for a great way to start off the ride as well, as you're in no doubt that this coaster will be thrilling when the first thing that happens after the launch is that you're flipped upside down. There's some really great airtime moments on this coaster too, the strongest of which is probably the large airtime hill that follows the top hat after the second launch, but the twisted airtime hill is pretty powerful too. This is an element that has long been a signature of Intamin, going back to some of the much earlier coasters, and it's just as good as on any other ride, an awesome moment. If there's one element that falls a little flat though, it's probably the double down that follows the twisted airtime hill, as this feels more like a bump in the road rather than anything that generates meaningful forces. It's a bit of a shame as you get a neat view of this section of the track in the queue line, but it's the least thrilling part of the ride. The inversions are all really good fun though, and the one after the double down is quite nice and floaty, but the final inversion I think is a little more special. It's a heartline roll just above the water, and if you're a coaster enthusiast, that might sound a little familiar. Yes, this coaster has its own mini Mosasaurus roll, just like Velocicoaster. It's a super fun element, and a great way to finish off the ride, with the thrill of the inversion and the water rushing just past above your head. It's fantastic. It's sections like this that really amplify the pacing of the ride when you're low to the ground and going fast. Apart from the double down, there really isn't a dull moment during the whole experience, and each element flows expertly into the next. The top speed of the ride may only be 40 miles an hour, but it never feels like it's slowing down, and each element delivers some nice forces. The rapid chicane at the end is another favourite part of the ride for me, as this way it stays low to the ground and gives you a really good speed sensation. It feels much faster than it actually is. The overall layout and pacing of this ride is fantastic, and it gives a really satisfying ride that's suitable for a wide range of ages, thanks to the height limit of this only being 48 inches, or 1.2 metres. Mahuka is located in a new section of the park that has an exotic island theme, and the name Mahuka actually translates to escape in Hawaiian. The area has some nice building and rock work that showcase the South Pacific theme, and in general it all looks great. I think the park's got a lot more plans for this area though, as there's a large empty space next to the ride, and I expect there's going to be some new attractions there in the future. The entrance to the exotic island area is marked with the combined double top hat element, which makes for a great and unique visual. It's a cool archway that you walk under when you head towards the ride. I'm actually kind of surprised that they've managed to avoid having any netting underneath the track here, as people walk underneath it freely. There weren't any excessive restrictions on keeping things out of your pocket when riding as well, so the openness in this part of the track where loose items could potentially get dislodged is a bit of a bold choice, and I hope the park never has any problems related to it, as I do think it's a really neat way to walk straight to the ride and then under the track in this way. Now, before going to the park, I was a little concerned about the ride's capacity, as each train only holds 9 people, but thankfully ride operations were fantastic when I visited, and they were dispatching trains with minimal delay and sourcing single riders and odd numbers of people from the queue line, so every train was full. One time they even called me back in from the ride exit to fill an empty seat and get another ride in the back row. It was kinda nice. Mahuka seemed to operate pretty much flawlessly for most of the day, but sadly there was some issue that cropped up later on that forced it to close, and it didn't reopen during the final hour that the park was open. This was a bit disappointing as I would have liked to have another few more rides on it, but earlier in the day I had a whole bunch, so I can't complain too much. Intamin are referring to this ride as an upgraded version of the Hot Racer prototype that opened in Sydney, and they've certainly made quite a few changes to improve the coaster design, such as adding carbon fibre lap bars to lighten the train and lower its centre of gravity. This is something that's probably quite important for single rail designs, as on single rail Alpine coasters I find that I've got quite a high centre of gravity, which can make the ride feel a bit unstable, but I'll cover more of that in a future video. One thought I kept having while riding Mahuka was, who exactly is this coaster for? It does seem to be a pretty good fit for Walibe Rhône-Alpes, but despite the fantastic operations, it's still only got a maximum capacity of about 600 riders per hour, which to me seems far too small for this model to ever get chosen by a larger park. I also think it provides a pretty thrilling ride, which for this layout puts it more towards the thrill coaster end of the spectrum, as opposed to a family coaster, which you might think from its low height requirement. I guess it therefore makes a good argument to be a thrill ride for the bravest kids at relatively small parks. Maybe looking to be an alternative to smaller versions of Gerstlauer's Eurofighter model. The marketing for the ride on Intamin's website seems to emphasise big possibilities for a small footprint, so maybe we'll see these designs in the near future replacing worn-out Wild Mice or other similar but less popular rides. So one big question I was having was, how does it compare to similar rides, and the obvious coaster to compare this one to is RMC's single Raptor coasters. And the first difference I'll point out is the trains on Intamin's coaster are 1,000 times better than RMC's ones. There's no over-the-shoulder restraint on the Mahuka, and in addition to this, you can keep your legs straight rather than having to bend them outwards in a knock-kneed fashion that you have to do on the Raptor coaster. The seats on the Mahuka are pretty much the same as the latest generation launch coasters like Gotham City Escape, so they're extremely comfortable, whereas RMC's single rail trains feel like, in comparison, they've been designed by some sort of sadist. As for the rest of the ride experience, it's actually kind of hard to compare. I've ridden 3 Raptor coasters, Wonder Woman, Railblazer and Wonder Woman Golden Lasso, and my memories of them are all quite different. I really enjoyed Railblazer, and it's been quite a few years since I've rode it. However, Wonder Woman at Fiesta Texas I found to be really quite rough, and you notice the joins between the track on every single jolt. The smaller versions of RMC's Raptor also have a very different riding experience in terms of pacing as well, as they make use of the single rail to do rapid heart-blind transitions and crazy moves, which feel incredibly fast, whereas on the larger Wonder Woman coaster, it's got a more traditional and drawn-out layout with big elements. Compared to Intamin's version, I think the smaller RMC coasters generally offer a wilder ride, but the added comfort provided by the restraints of Mahuka cannot be underestimated. Overall, I think Mahuka is a fantastic coaster that gives a comfortable but thrilling ride with impeccable pacing. It's endlessly re-rideable and suitable for brave kids, but also gives an awesome ride to seasoned enthusiasts. Like many smaller coasters, it doesn't really have the wow factor of a headline destination coaster, but it's a really solid design that's really a perfect addition to the park it's in, and it really complements the lineup of coasters that are already there. I can easily see versions of this ride popping up at smaller parks around the world that want a launch coaster in a small footprint with a unique and exciting layout. If Intamin can price it right for them, then the Hot Racer coaster is going to have a fantastic future ahead of it. So that wraps up my review, but I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on single rail coasters and what your favourite one is, so let me know in the comments. This will probably be my last European coaster review for this season, but I have a few more video projects planned, including vlogging my journey across the Alps to ride as many alpine coasters as possible, a trip that spanned 7 different countries and led to some amazing adventures, so if you're curious about how that turned out, then be sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. I've been Rollercoaster David, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again in another video very soon.